So I'm here to talk about creativity, but I think Federico really warmed you up and did a good job. So let's give him a round of applause, because I was very impressed with that. I have a little question for you. I want you to take a moment and to think about the organization that has had the biggest impact on your life and why. You got something in your head? Okay, I'm going to come back to it. All my life, I've been doing the same thing, but didn't quite realize it. When I was a child, I used to make my little brother and my friends dress up and perform dances in front of our family. When I was at school and university, I choreographed fashion shows and dance shows and spent hours coaching younger students so that they could come onto stages like this and to perform. And in my career, I spent 5 years building a social enterprise where we taught hundreds of people around the world how to do our job. I thought all of these choices were quite random, but actually they weren't. What I was doing was helping people to put their ideas into action. And the organization I work for, the RSA, the Royal Society for the Encouragement of Arts, Manufactures and Commerce, has been doing this for 260 years. We are 2 years younger than your Royal Society here in Haarlem, just 2. Now, most people aren't impacted or affected by an organization until they work there. But I was by the RSA, and maybe you are as well, but you haven't noticed it or realized it yet. I went to a girls' school in London, a state girls' school, and I wouldn't have gone there if the RSA in 1871 hadn't pioneered girls' education for all classes. I've sat exams and I took my driving license, and I wouldn't have been able to do that if in 1856 the RSA hadn't pioneered vocational qualifications on a national basis. And something that we've all done, I'm sure, at some point, is use a public toilet. In 1852, the RSA piloted something called public waiting rooms. It didn't actually work, but it was taken up a little bit later. The RSA stood for a very simple thing, that anybody and everybody can and should turn their ideas into reality. Our mission has always been the same. How can we expand the number of people that can do that? And we call this the power to create. Now, the power to create is an idea, but it's also underpinned by actions. And it's obvious that around the world we are influenced by the values of the Enlightenment period, the values of freedom and justice and progress. But my question is whether or not those values are relevant for today. On the topic of freedom, sometimes I feel like these values have been hollowed out. Freedom seems to have meant consumption. We want more and more and bigger, but we don't think about the social or the environmental or the economic impact that that consumption has. When we talk about justice, it seems that it's a metric to have equal incomes. And on progress, I sometimes feel like we're on a train, and you've got technology and finance, and they're driving us in a direction over which we have very little control. So, if we are serious about the power to create and helping everybody to put their ideas into action, then we need to revisit these Enlightenment values for the 21st century. When we think about freedom, real freedom is about being free from the things that stop us being creative. It means having elements of our character that can overcome challenges, our aspiration, our level of ambition, how empowered we feel. When we think about justice, it's not just financial equality, but it's about whether or not we have a deep understanding and respect for one another. And at the heart, the starting point of this is empathy. We need to grow our stock of empathy in the world if we are to make longer-term decisions that put the planet and put its citizens before the needs of our own. And the best judgment of progress has to be human welfare, not technological development or financial gain. It's whether or not we've understood the ethics that sit behind us wanting and achieving progress. bearing in mind the differences that we have with each other. So this is great, but at the RSA, we're not just about ideas, we're also about action. But we are about action when we feel that there are some changes in the air. The RSA was started by 12 enlightened people. Now, there are 27,000 progressive individuals that support the work of the organization, and it's those people that we listen to. So the trends that I get quite excited about is that we're seeing an increase in demand for creativity. There is something called the World Values Survey, and it says that we are prioritizing what we call self-expression values. In the developed world, as we get richer and we are healthier and we're more better educated, we want to lead larger lives, which means that we want more autonomy, because we want our lives to be more meaningful. At the same time, we're also seeing the sheer scale and complexity of the challenges that we're facing around the world is really forcing us to think differently about how change happens at all. I'm not sure we understand how change actually happens, not now. Global challenges, we've already talked about, climate change, deep inequality, an aging population, demographic shifts. They don't allow single, simple interventions to work. So I think we need more people to have more ideas, individually, but also collectively. And it's obvious that underpinning some of these changes is this small shift in power. And this is what I find really exciting. There is a movement from those that had power to those that have power now. How they have it, how they distribute it, and where it's going. The pioneers of these are new power organizations. Organizations that have figured out that by engaging with the challenges of those with the least power, they can actually create creativity for millions of people. Now, we see this in organizations that allow us to share content, YouTube and Facebook. We see this in organizations that allow us to collaborate with an asset, Airbnb. Organizations that provide funding, crowdfunding, like Kiva or Kickstarter, or those organizations where we feel we're part of it, a bit like Wikipedia. But what I love about these organizations is that they are in complete opposition to the old power hierarchies, those which was all about consumption, where it was about control. These new ones realize that peer collaboration is how we're going to unleash the creativity of the masses, and that is how we're going to support organizations to flourish. Underpinning all of this is certainly disruptive technologies. They're tearing down the barriers to creativity. In an era of self-generated value, we're no longer just consumers, but we're more producers. But it's not technology that's driving this shift. We're not on the train. What's driving this shift is human agency. Back to that point about our rising demand for creativity. So, great. We have this philosophical view of the power to create. We have some trends that say it'll happen, so why am I here? And where do you come in? Unsurprisingly, there are still some challenges to overcome if we are to make the power to create and putting everybody's ideas into practice a reality for everyone. And you have an influence on this. One of the biggest challenges is actually our culture, because it's not widely accepted in our global culture that everybody can lead creative lives. If we're honest, it's not even seen as something to aspire to, let alone something that is practical. And it's not because we don't think it's good. I'm sure you think it's good, right? Yeah. But it's more that those that have the privilege, those at the top, they don't want to give anything up. And for everybody else, apart from in a few professions, they don't necessarily see themselves as creative. That's why at the RSA, we have done work to explain to governments how they can and they should give their power to cities and to citizens, so that those cities and citizens are empowered to drive their economies and their societies. The point isn't about inequality per se, but that the concentration of the wealth and the opportunities to build creative ideas and not maximized for everybody. So in other words, if there isn't a change in how we think, the 1% is going to remain the 1%. The other challenge, I quite like this two-hand thing. The other challenge we have is that our organizations aren't designed in a way to unleash our creativity. The hierarchies actually drive it out. How many of you feel like you bring all of yourself to work or to school? How many of you, oh, I've got one hand, that's great. Okay, but I have literally 6 hands in the audience. Or how many of you feel that all of your being, whether you're your parents or your board members or your musicians or your artists or your thinkers, is used in the most productive capacity? It may be that we need a very different way of organizing if we're to unleash the creativity of people through work. And that's why recently the RSA rewarded one of your fellow countrymen, a gentleman called Josta Blok. I might not be saying that very right, but that's how I understand it. Because he has an organization that he's had for a number of years called Berzog. And Berzog is amazing. It's a self-managed organization. There is no hierarchy. It's based on collaboration, and it's based on trust. And it's very radical. But maybe that's the direction that we need to go in. And the third challenge is about how we distribute resources to help people to be creative. We know that these resources aren't distributed equally, and that is a hugely contentious issue. At the moment, at the RSA, we address this in a couple of ways. We work with young student designers, and we help them to apply their fantastic design thinking to social change, so they can find creative ways of distributing resources. We work with established designers, so that they can develop cradle-to-cradle approaches, making sure that every part of their product is part of a circular economy. And we challenge the idea that everyone can and maybe should be a capitalist. What would you do if you had money or capital? Would you realize some of your ideas? At the beginning, I talked a bit about me, and I talked about the RSA. This idea of putting ideas into practice is actually very personal for me as well, thank you, as a woman. Because until women have equal position in business, in government, in civil society, we are losing out on a whole load of potential, untapped creativity. The power to create can be a powerful concept. And I certainly believe that everybody here has the ability to turn yours and other people's ideas into reality. But maybe even more importantly, I believe that we have a role to play to make sure that 21st century enlightenment and the power to create is something that everybody benefits from, not just an elite few. So I have a request for you. Ding! I would like you to think about what you can do in your life, what you can do in Haarlem, in the Netherlands, in Europe, and I want you to send me a message. What are your ideas? Because it's only by getting the ideas of the masses that we have a chance to address the challenges, but also to realize the opportunities of the century. The last Enlightenment took 200 years to get off the ground. I don't know about you, but I don't have that much patience. So let's make sure that this one is much, much faster. Dank u wel. Ik hoop dat je geïnspireerd bent.